So, welcome. Sorry about the confusion earlier. I sent out, I was doing two of these for two different classes tonight, and I got the times mixed up, which you may have noticed because I had to send out two announcements this morning because I had the times. I had them correct on yesterday's announcement, but got them reversed on today's announcement. So, and then had them reversed when I set up the reminder to go out. So I apologize. I'm gonna have to just double check next time because I don't want to confuse you guys further. So, welcome. So how this works, because you guys are here at your first one, I do record these and then I email them out the next day. I usually do some editing if I, need to. So anything that you say on microphone will show up in the recording. So if you prefer to not be on the recording, you can ask questions in the chat. It's up to you. I'm happy to take questions either in the chat or verbally through a microphone. Webcams will not show up basically on the recording because it's going to be just what I'm sharing. So that's the only thing that's going to be recorded. So you don't have to worry about that. I basically, each week I will go through a lesson. If you look in the classroom, I have links already. I have placed links in there for previous lives that I've done in other terms. So that way there's basically a collection of videos for every single topic. And so, you can always review those other ones. Those are all linked. And I don't know if I'm going to be doing the same time for next week. It's going to depend on the survey results. So if you haven't done that survey to tell me what times you're available for live sessions, please do, because I do pick the ones the most available, with the most people that say they can attend. Those are the times that I pick to do these. So that's really important because I do want to try to make these at a time you can attend. I know I can't make everyone happy, but I try to at least make as many happy as I can. So, but they are recorded if you can't make it. So that's how this is going to work. So I'm going to share my screen. I go through a presentation. I have a stylus, so it's like you're, seeing it on a board, on a whiteboard, basically being worked out. And you're happy to ask me questions, stop me along the way. I'm happy to answer questions. And I always, along with the recording, email out the presentation as well. So some people just choose to watch and listen. Some people will take notes at the same time. It's up to you, but you'll have access to everything tomorrow when I email it out. So with that, I will get my screen going. Okay, so we're dividing fractions. I have videos in the classroom already on multiplying fractions. And if you haven't seen that video, that's okay, because dividing is essentially like multiplying fractions. So you'll kind of get the same stuff here as well. I can get my slide to move. There we go. Okay, so let's start with what exactly is a fraction. Now, let me tell you from the very beginning, fractions are not scary. I know people hate fractions. They think they're really scary. They really are not bad. I actually prefer fractions to decimals. I think they're easier. So a fraction is just a way that we use to show parts out of a whole. So the top is how many parts you have. The bottom is how many parts make up the whole. So 1/2 is you have 1 out of 2 parts. And you can have improper fractions where the top is bigger. So maybe you have 3 halves. So your whole thing is cut into 2 halves and you've got 3. So you've got a whole thing and a little bit and a half left over. So you've got 3 of those total. So that's all a fraction is. And so the one thing that's really important to remember with fractions is that a fraction is the same thing as division. So if you have a fraction, you can think of it as division, and sometimes they simplify to a whole number because it's basically division. So a fraction is just another way of writing division. And a lot of times, instead of using the division symbol, we will write it as a fraction instead. And that is very common in algebra, is that we will not use the division symbol, we'll write them as fractions. So just remember that, that's very important. So the top of the fraction is called the numerator, the bottom is called the denominator. I just usually call it, I mean, I will use both numerator and denominator. I'll also just use top and bottom. The reciprocal of a number, and this is really important for the division part, is that it is basically the value flip-flopped. And it's basically if you take a number and multiply it by the reciprocal, they will cancel out and result in 1. So this is, it looks like an I. That is the number 1 there. So if you have A over B, the reciprocal is B over A. If you have 3 over 2, the reciprocal is 2 over 3. You're just flip-flopping. If you have a whole number like 2, its reciprocal is 1 over 2. And this is because all whole numbers can be written as fractions if you write it over 1. And that's because it's division. 2 divided by 1 is 2. So we need to know, we need to understand reciprocals because that's how we divide fractions. So division is defined as multiplying by the reciprocal. And this is important when we go to order of operations. This is why with the order of operations, multiplication and division are done at the same time, just left to right, because division is multiplication. We just have to rewrite it. So if you have something divided, you multiply by the reciprocal, and then all you've got is a multiplication problem, and it's no longer a division problem. So I've got an example here, A over B divided by C over D. So you just have two fractions divided. You flip the second fraction, and the division symbol turns into a multiplication, and those are the same thing. So you always change the symbol, flip the fraction after the symbol. And then it's now a multiplication problem. Once you get to the multiplication part, you can simplify your fractions before you do the multiplication, or you can simplify it after you multiply, but you never want to simplify before you've turned it into multiplication. Because if you simplify while it's in the division form, you're simplifying incorrectly if you try to simplify top and bottom. So wait to simplify fractions until after it's been converted to multiplication. So now I've just got many examples. So we're just going to go through examples of how to divide fractions and ask me questions as we go. But I'm going to try to make it as easy as possible. And whenever I work with fractions and multiplying or dividing fractions, I work across, I work horizontally. So that's what I'm going to be doing here, is I'm going to be working horizontally, and that just is easier for me when I'm dealing with fractions. So we've got 3 over 7 divided by 9 over 14. So we turn this into a multiplication problem by flipping that second fraction. So it's 3 over 7, and then it turns into multiplication, and then it's going to be 14 over 9. Now, we do not use the X for the time symbol. We use a dot. Or if you are on a computer, you can use a little star for multiplication. But we don't use the X because we're in algebra and X is a letter, X is a variable, and it gets confusing. So never use the X, use a dot, or use the star. And that's what we'll be using for multiplication. So I recommend getting into the habit now so that you don't get confused later on when you look at your notes and you don't know if it's multiplication or a letter. So get in the habit of doing a dot. So I have turned my division into a multiplication problem. Now, I like to simplify my multiplication before I actually multiply, because then I multiply smaller numbers. And so that's what makes it easier for me and not as, scary when you're looking at fractions, is if I simplify them beforehand to make my numbers smaller. So when we are simplifying fractions that are multiplied together, you are looking for a number that you can divide out of a number on the top and divide out of a number on the bottom. They don't have to be in the same fraction. It just has to be one number on top, one number in the bottom. And you have to be able to divide them by the same number. So for example, 14 is on top, 7 is on the bottom. Both of those numbers can be divided by 7. And that will allow me to reduce my fraction or simplify it before I do my multiplication. Now, the way that I show my work for this is I will do this in a different color, and I will literally write down what I'm dividing by. And I do that so that I remember what I'm dividing by, and to make it very clear, I'm what is going on. I'm showing my work by doing this. You can try to do it in your head, and I've seen people will cross out the number and then write the result, and I do that from time to time. But I have found that if I do that, I tend to write down the wrong number. So, like, I'm dividing 14 by 7, and my result will be 2, but sometimes I write down 7 instead of 2 because 7 is what I divided by. So instead, I actually write down my division so I don't get confused. So, and you need it, whatever you do on the top, you have to also do on the bottom. So that's why I have to do one on top, one on the bottom, and we have to divide by the same number. Now I can also reduce the 3 and the 9. And so I'll do that, and I usually will write that in a different color just so I can kind of keep them separate, and I can divide those both by 3, because 3 goes into both of those numbers. So I just, like to kind of do some color coding so I can see what things kind of go together. So once I've determined how I'm going to reduce these numbers, then I will actually reduce them. So I'll have 3 divided by 3, which is 1. 7 divided by 7, which is 1. And then I've got my multiplication. Then 14 divided by 7 is 2. 9 divided by 3 is 3. And by doing that, simplifying in the beginning, now what I'm multiplying is a lot easier. Because I have 1 times 2/3. Because I have 1 over 1, which is just 1. The rule when you're multiplying fractions is that you multiply straight across. So we're just basically doing 1 times 2 on the top, which is 2, and then 1 times 3 on the bottom. And I don't have to do any more reducing because I already took care of that. So the answer to this division problem is 2/3. So we had 3 7s divided by 9 over 14. And that comes out to 2/3. Are there any questions? Okay, so let's do the second problem. We have 7 over 25 divided by 1 over 5. So I'm going to just rewrite this so that you can really see the progression here. So we take that second fraction and we take the reciprocal and we turn it into multiplication. So this is going to be the same thing as 7 over 25 times 5 over 1. So I want to try to reduce whenever possible. So I see that out of 25 and 5, I can divide those both by 5. So I'm going to do that. If you are not good with mental math for multiplication and division, I strongly encourage you to practice and really know your times tables, because it will make your life easier. because you can immediately look at these numbers and say, I can divide them both by 5. If you're not good at your times tables, then you have to sit here and like kind of guess and figure out what numbers you can reduce in them, and it takes longer. So it really is worth your time to try to get your times tables. And then if you have your times tables, then you also know your division tables, and it will really save you time. So I've got 7 over, and then 25 divided by 5 is 5. So that becomes 7 over 5. And then 5 divided by 5 is 1. And that is 1 over 1. So in this case, when we had 7 over 25 times 5 over 1, I could divide the 25 and the 5 by 5, but 7 and 1 didn't have anything in common, so that's why I didn't try to divide anything out of there. I could divide it by 1, but that's not going to get me anywhere. So I only needed to reduce once here. I couldn't reduce everything, but that's okay, because we end up with something here where we're basically once again multiplying by 1. So we're going to have 7 times 1, which is 7, and then 5 times 1, which is 5. And we end up with 7 over 5 as our answer. Are there any questions? Okay, so since I didn't see anybody with any questions, we've got 2 more here. Now these are involving whole numbers. So we're dividing by a whole number here. We've got 12 over 5. And you know what? This second one, I'm going to reverse this just to make it a little bit different. Let's instead do 5 divided by 20 over 6. Just to let's just flip that up. So first one, we'll do 12 over 5 divided by 4. So I'm going to start by just rewriting the problem. And I'm going to turn 4 into a fraction. So if you've got a whole number and you're going to be multiplying or dividing fractions, turn your whole number into a fraction, because when you turn it into the reciprocal, you need to have it in fraction form. So we're going to turn this into multiplication by flipping the second fraction. So this will give us 12 over 5 times 1 over 4. So I've turned my division problem into a multiplication problem. And now I want to try to reduce as much as possible, just so that it makes my life easier. So I just look at my numbers, and again, you really want to know your multiplication tables and your division tables. And I know, 12 and 4. I can divide those both by 4, because I know 4 goes into 12. So I'm going to divide 12 by 4, and I'm going to divide 4 by 4. And then I'm looking, and I'm like, well, 1 and 5, there's nothing in common there, so I can't really reduce those. So I'm going to write my next step. 12 divided by 4 is 3, and then I have 5, 1, and then 4 divided by 4 once again is 1. So again, all of these just happen to be canceling out, so one of the fractions comes out to 1, but we multiply straight across, and we get 3 over 5. Second example here, we've got 5 divided by 20 over 6. Now we're dividing by fractions. You're going to want to write all of your numbers as a fraction. So I'm going to rewrite 5 as a fraction. So that's 5 over 1. And we're dividing by 20 over 6. So to turn this into multiplication, we need to flip the second fraction. So I don't know, sometimes, maybe you want to write little notes to yourself, turn that into multiplication, maybe write arrows so that you remember that you flip, whatever you need to remember. And we get 5 over 1 times 6 over 20. So we want to try to simplify. And we have multiple choices in this case. So I can divide 5 and 20 both by 5. But I can also divide 6 and 20 by 2. 2 goes into both of those. Now, I usually try to use the bigger of the two. You know, I'd rather divide by 5 than divide by 2 because that's going to make my numbers smaller. So that's what I do when I work with fractions. So I'm going to divide these both by 5. And then that means I have to look at 1 and 6, but I can't divide that by anything. So 5 divided by 5 is 1. So I get 1 over 1. And then I get 6 over 20 divided by 5 is 4. Now, all of the other examples I've done so far, I've stopped and I've multiplied because that's my final answer. But here, 6 and 4 still have a number in common. Like the one above, 3 and 5, there was nothing in common there. Our other examples here, there was nothing in common between 2 and 3, or 7 and 5. But 6 and 4 do have something in common because I can still divide those by 2. Remember, that was my other option, was dividing 6 and 20 by 2. So I do have to eventually divide by that number. I'm just doing it at a different spot. And so I need to divide those by 2 because I need to still reduce them further. So that gives me 1 over 1 times 3 over 2. 6 divided by 2 is 3, and 4 divided by 2 is 2. And now I have numbers that don't have anything in common. 3 and 2, I can't divide them by anything. I'll just get fractions if I try, or decimals. So now I can multiply across. So 1 times 3 is 3, and 1 times 2 is 2. And so our answer is 3 over 2. Got it better too. Are there any questions on either of these two examples? Okay. So these are actually my last two examples, so I'm not going to be taking a lot of your time tonight. And these have some bigger numbers, and but we're going to divide these. So the first one, we've got 9 over 100 divided by 13 over 1000. So I'm just going to rewrite these just so that I can do my, indicate what I'm flipping. So when we have division, we're always flipping the second fraction there. So whatever you need to do to remind yourself, I like to circle it. So we have 9 over 100 times 1000 over 13. Okay, so now I want to try to reduce these because I certainly do not want to multiply my numbers right now because they're going to be really big numbers. So I've got 1000 and I've got 100. I know I can divide those both by 10. It may not be the largest thing I can divide by, but that's the first thing that I think of. And so that's what I'm going to go with. I'm just going to go with the first number that I think of. It doesn't have to be the biggest. So I'm going to divide those by 10 to try to reduce them. And out of 9 and 13, they don't have a number in common because 13 is a prime, which means that there's nothing that divides into it. So I can't reduce that. So I'm going to have 9 over 10 because 100 divided by 10 is 10. And then 1000 divided by 10 is going to be 100. And so I end up with 100 over 13. So now I've got smaller numbers to look at, and I look at, oops, I wrote it, this should be multiplication, not an equal sign. So I've got smaller numbers here, and now I look at this and I'm like, oh, I can divide 10 into 10 and 100. So I could have divided them by 100 in the first step instead of 10 and then 10 again, but you can just do whatever comes to your head. And for me, 10 was the first thing that I thought of. So I can just divide these by 10 a second time. So that gives us 9 over 1, because 10 divided by 10 is 1. And then 100 divided by 10, again, is 10, and then 13. And now I don't have any numbers in common. I can't cancel anything out here. So now I'm going to multiply straight across. So we're going to have 9 times 10, which is 90. 1 times 13 is 13. And so our final answer will be 90 over 13. And we're not going to be converting these to mixed numbers. So you may be used to working with a whole number and then a fraction, which is called a mixed number. We're not going to work with that. When you're in algebra, it's not worth your time. Most of the time, it's more work than we need to deal with. So we don't turn things into mixed numbers. We just leave them in the form that they're in. It saves you steps. So we're going to leave it in this form as an improper fraction. So even though the number on top is larger than the number on bottom, it doesn't matter. We don't care. So don't try to do extra work and turn it into a mixed number, because it's more work than you need to do. You can leave it as 90 over 13, and that is perfectly valid. And I think it's a lot easier to just leave it like that. Are there any questions on this example? Okay, so I'll do the last one that I've got here. We've got 1,000 over 17 divided by 10 over 3. And so we're turning it into multiplication by flipping the second fraction. So that's going to be 1,000 over 17 times 3 over 10. So I can divide 1,010 by 10. So I'm going to just write that in. But the 3 and the 17, they don't have anything in common. 3 doesn't go into 17, so I can't reduce those two numbers. So 1,000 divided by 10 is 100, so we get 100 over 17 times 3 over 1. Because 10 divided by 10 is 1. And now I look at what I've got. I can't do any more reducing. Even though 100 is really big, I can't divide it by 17 or 1. There's nothing else I can divide into it. So now we're going to multiply. So you just have 100 times 3. So that's 300. 17 times 1, which is 17. And that gives our final answer of 300 over 17. Okay. So that's all I had. That's dividing by fractions. And dividing and then thus multiplying, because we also basically multiplied fractions here. It's not bad. It's not too bad. All you need to be able to do is know your division and your multiplication tables. And then you can do it. The harder part is probably adding and subtracting fractions. But lucky for you, most of what we do in this class is going to be multiplication or dividing with fractions. We're not really going to be doing a lot of adding and subtracting fractions. So if fractions are involved, it's going to be this kind of stuff where we're going to be multiplying or dividing. So it's not as bad as you may think. Hopefully I've shown that it's not as bad. You guys had no questions, so I'm assuming that that you're able to follow it. So fractions are not scary. And if we start with fractions and fractions aren't scary, then you can see that algebra is not scary. So I'm going to just go back to sharing my camera. So before I end for the night, you know, and let you guys get back to your other class that you might want to be working on or whatever you might be doing. Do you have questions about the class itself? Because I know it's second day of class. The first week of any online class can be overwhelming because there's so much you have to kind of get used to, like, what am I supposed to do? You know, a lot of questions about that kind of stuff. So are there any questions that you have about the class that I can answer right now? Well, I'm going to just briefly share my screen again. So you guys are very quiet. I did a, you know, the live that I did earlier here was they had questions. Yeah, Patricia, you have a question. You can chat it or you can unmute yourself and use your microphone, whatever you want. The chat is the purple button in the bottom right if you're looking for it. You don't have your microphone on, so I can't hear if you're asking a question. So I guess while you figure that out, there you go. Where can you find direction for snippet on a MacBook? Oh, that is a good question. Let's actually Google that. How to take screenshots on MacBook. Because I don't have a Mac. I don't know how to use Macs. So I Google. That's what I do. Okay. Oh, you know what? This is actually almost the same thing that you can do on Windows. So the reason why this question is coming up is because the Connect Math homework does not, you know, the scores don't go into the Blackboard gradebook. It doesn't interface that way, which is really unfortunate. So you have to take a screenshot of your gradebook in Connect Math so that we can actually enter in the score. So if you have a Mac, apparently it's Shift, the Command button, and then 3. And if you only need a little bit of the screen, which is what we need, we don't necessarily need the whole screen, but either one of these will work. You can do Shift, Command, and 4. So there is a tutorial in the class, but the tutorial in the class is only for Windows machines. But just to show you guys what we're talking about here. Okay, so I need to make sure because I'm on student mode, or I'm not really in student mode. I'm pretending I'm a student. So, you know, before you have access to the folders in the class, you do have to acknowledge our academic integrity. So that way, you know, if you're found cheating, oh, right, because I'm on this mode, it doesn't. And then like your folders will open up. So this is the assignment that you have to take screenshots for. And yes, using a smartphone is okay. I don't think Connect Math is easy to do on a smartphone, but I think it does work. I've never tried to do Connect Math on the phone, so you might want to test that out. And if it doesn't work on a phone, you may want to, I don't know, see about switching classes until you get a computer. Because I don't know how well it works on a phone. But if it works, you can go ahead and do it. And you can use your phone to take a picture, but this is the screenshot assignment that you have to do after you do your homeworks. And so I'll just log in and Connect Math to show you guys. Yeah, so you're going to log in and you need to click the Connect Math button, not the Alex button. So the Alex button won't work. So you need to click the Connect Math. And then you'll be in the class and then you can open the folders. And then when you take your screenshot, you take it from the gradebook here. But I'm in teacher mode, so I'm not going to show the gradebook. And then like when you take your quiz, right here. Nope, now I got to go back. So after you take your quiz, you need to also upload your handwritten work for the quiz so that you can get partial credit and for your quiz to count in your score. Because just like the homework, the quiz doesn't transfer into the gradebook either. So we have you submit your work for the quiz. You don't need your work for the homework because the homework is unlimited attempts, so you can get hundreds on there. But we do the work for the quiz because you get one chance on the quiz. And so if you make a mistake, but you have a work correct, we can give you partial credit versus just a 0. So you do have to upload your work. You can take pictures of it with with your phone or whatever, and then you can just upload it right here. And you can upload multiple files. Sometimes people get confused. So you can upload multiple files. If you browse local files, I'm going to just randomly click on some files. You just click it again if you need to add another file. And so if you need to add multiple pictures, you can do that here. But what I really wanted to show you guys, in case you do have pictures, so if you scroll down here, I've got all of my announcements. I've got this little thing that I'm trying out this term. This is the first time I've done this. But if you have questions on stuff, like you're submitting your screenshot here, like you can hit the plus button, and then it has the video. And then this will go back. So if you have a question about like the quiz, this will give you some information about the quiz. So if you do have questions, check out this thing. And then I also have this one, which is more general. So it has like due dates and late policy. There's a home button right here. Assignments and grading. So it has a grading policy, and this arrow will take you to the next screen. And so, if there's information, so if you're confused about like Connect Math, this is explaining what each of the icons are meaning and all that. So if you haven't looked at these kind of things, these little interactive things, I definitely recommend doing so, because it does have a lot of information, and some of your answers some of your questions may be answered in these things. So I just wanted to make sure that I pointed that out. And if you missed any announcements, you can scroll down and read through the announcements. Lots of important things in here. So I know there's a lot. I know the first weekend can be really overwhelming, but every week is basically going to be set up identical to the first week. So once you get through one week, the rest of the weeks are going to be very similar, and you'll get used to it and you'll be fine. Are there other questions? Okay, so I'll put back my camera. Okay, so like I said, next week's might be different based off of the survey results. So if you haven't done that live session survey to determine like what times are good for live sessions, please do so. If later in the term your availability changes, you feel free to update your survey results. I'll just kind of keep checking it to make sure I've got like the most popular time and that sort of thing. So I'll let you know in advance next week if it's going to be the same time next week or if it will be a different time. So don't worry, I'll let you know. That will be in the week or the week 2, like Wednesday, when I do my first announcement for week 2. I'll put the information there. So to log out of this, video session, the live session, all you need to do is close your browser. If you close the browser window, you'll be logged out. So you can exit on the top left. There's a menu as well, but closing works just as well. So thank you guys for coming for the first one. You probably weren't sure what to expect and everything, but hopefully this was helpful, and you feel a little bit better that I'm doing these every week, and so you can have your questions answered. You'll get some actually, help and all of that kind of thing. So I will see you guys later, interact with you in the classes or in the discussion. And I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your evening. And yeah, so take care, everybody. Bye.